Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Welcome to a special Europe-friendly time for a live stream. So a particular welcome to you if you're not normally here, if you can't normally make it, because these are in the middle of the night for you. Today is going to be just a Game of Thrones Q&A. It's an open Q&A, so we're going to be doing things the way we normally do them. I've got a whole load of questions from my fantastic patrons that I'm going to be working my way through, but also I'm going to be picking up on any super chats as they come through, of course, and I'm going to get to as many comments as I possibly can in the chat. So the idea here is that it's going to be random, so we're not following a particular subject. It's anything about Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire, and we'll just see where we go with it. And I just want to say, actually, first of all, so many fantastic super chats already before we even went live. Catherine C saying, thank you, Robert, for this Europe-friendly time. You're very welcome. Guys, incidentally, if this time does work for you, could you just sort of let me know in the chat or in the comments below, because I'm hoping I can do one of these about every month or so at a time that works for people on this side of the Atlantic. So if this time works well, let me know, and I'll try and do it again for this time in about a month or so's time. But Catherine, thank you so much. Rion, 55 euros. Wow, thank you. You're just saying thank you, Robert. That's incredibly generous. I really appreciate that. Linda Prasuta, $100. Wow. Blown away. It's just saying thanks for all you do, Robert. You are very welcome. I think I've got a question from you left on Patreon that we will get to a little bit later. So thank you for that. We also had, I think Marvin Martin had a couple of questions. I'll get to them in just one second, Marvin, but thank you for the super chat. And Maura Lee, a very generous super chat before, about half an hour, I think, before we went live, saying, here is wishing you, Robert, and everyone in the chat a fantastic weekend. I left my questions on Patreon. Thank you. I picked those up, and I will definitely get to them. Maura, thank you. It was incredibly generous. You know how much your ongoing support to me blows my mind, so thank you. But guys, we've got a whole load of questions to be getting through. I'll start with the ones from Marvin Martin. Thank you. Two questions saying, the first one, Unsullied are tough, Varys is a genius, and many monastic orders have chaste vows. Shouldn't there be less disdain for eunuchs? Yes, there should. I think that there are different cultural approaches to this across Westeros, Essos, what different people seem to think. In terms of individuals like Varys, I think people treat him with the respect that he probably deserves. People respect they're Unsullied for being great warriors. The issue is, that, as it often is with prejudice and things like this, it's not the individuals. People often can point to individuals and say, I like them. It's the sort of the general feeling behind it and the overall kind of prejudice that there might be. So there probably should be, but tragically, like our world, George R.R. Martin has created a world which is realistic, and realism means that there are prejudices. So for me, yes, of course, there should be less disdain for eunuchs in that world, but I think that George R.R. Martin has created a realistic world in which people do and believe and think bad things just as they do in this world. So I think that's what's going on there. And the second question was, might the ending be ambiguous about whether the world is really better off without magic? I think, yes, it will be. I think that it's the chances of George R.R. Martin doing a really cut and dried ending with a kind of a moral message is very, very unlikely. He will create an ending that is a dramatic ending to the narrative, and he won't end up by saying, and therefore humanity lived without magic and they were much better off. I think that the overarching point that he makes with magic through the narrative is that magic itself is not inherently good or evil. It could be used for good, it could be used for evil, but it is dangerous, and it is that dangerous aspect of it that that he sort of emphasizes with this kind of idea of ice and fire as two competing forces, both of which could destroy the world. That's not to say that good things can't come from it, but you have to somehow control it, because if it gets out of control, then you're in trouble. So I think that is where he's heading with this, rather than just saying magic is good or magic is bad. I think we're going to end up more in a kind of a balance, rather than all magic completely disappears. I don't think we're going to end up in a situation where all magic completely disappears. But as with prophecy and visions and all the rest of it, George R.R. Martin is much more about, how does this impact on people? What does this mean? What do people believe? What do people do on the basis of the magic, with the magic, rather than looking at and wondering at the magic itself, if that makes sense. So thank you for that one. June Coates, thank you so much. Left a message on Patreon just saying, great to be able to tune in live, Robert. I'm in hospital recovering from surgery, and this will help fill the hours. So I just wanted to say, get well soon. I'm glad that I can help you pass the time while you're there. I certainly hope that you are out and fully recovered very soon. I see there's quite a few people in the chat. I think I saw Gemma from Secrets of the Citadel in the chat a moment ago, who, for those who don't know, I've just started a series with Gemma. If you go, when we finish this, check out her channel. You'll see the first in that series. We're looking at individual houses, interesting houses in Westeros. And so we started off doing a podcast. I think we went for over an hour talking about House Mormont, and in particular about Longclaw. So if that might interest you, then when we finish here, do go over and have a look at that. Next week, we're going to do one on my channel, which is going to be looking at House Hightower. Jack Hurst, thank you for leaving the question over on Patreon, saying, I know Tyrion is your favourite character, Robert. He is. So what differences do you anticipate with his ending in the show compared to where he'll end up in the books? I think the big difference is going to be in the subtlety and the layers to the ending that he's going to have. So on the show, I've said this before, I wasn't very happy with what happened with his character in the last season. I felt that he wasn't being as intelligent as he had been previously. He was always playing catch up. Cersei was outwitting him. It didn't really work for me. Now, I think that in the books, some of that will go across. I think in particular, probably that thing when he captures Casterly Rock very cleverly, only to discover that the army, the Lannister army, is off elsewhere taking high guard and say, I think that may well happen in the books. But generally speaking, I think that he's going to retain his political nous all the way through. What I think will happen on the show is going to be quite cut and dried. They don't tend to show the dark side of Tyrion so much. So the Tyrion that we have in the books is a lot more scarred. So he's a lot uglier, physically uglier, and also he does a lot darker things. He's not a good character per se. He's a multi-layered, complex character who does some quite evil things at times as well. He murders people, he rapes. There's a lot of bad stuff that he does. So what I imagine in the show is that they will carry on with this very clear black and white kind of view. Tyrion's one of the good guys. He may well die. I think that that's entirely possible, or he may survive. But whether or not he does on the show, it's not going to fundamentally show that the depth of character. In the novels, I think that we're going to get a lot more complex ending for him. I am attracted to the idea, there are several videos, pardon me, on it out there, that he may lose his tongue at some stage. That does have quite a lot of foreshadowing for it. So I could certainly see him surviving, but even more of a broken human than he was before. I think that may well be where he ends up, but I think he is going to be very much along the lines of this cripples, barters, and broken things that he himself talked about. I think they are the ones who are going to be surviving, and I think he is a principal part of that. So that's where I see the sort of the big differences there. Let's have a quick go into the chat. there's a lot of people are being saying nice things about having it on at this time. You're very welcome. I think I will definitely be doing this at roughly this time again. What else have we got going on? See Secrets of Citadel there. Kraken Tacos is there. Great to see you. Chris of Oldstones and Geek Chat 1, I think, are my moderators today. So, guys, if you want to give them a little bit of love, that would be fantastic. Let's go into another question. This is from Joe Thompson saying, what will become of Stannis' favorite wall art, Theon? What is Stannis' plan? Now, these are two different questions, I think. And the context here is, this is a book question. The context here, I think, is this is looking at the chapter, the pre-released chapter we've got from the Winds of Winter, which is a Theon chapter. And in that, his arc is slightly different. He escapes from Winterfell in the way that on the show we saw him jumping with Sansa. In the books, he jumps off the walls of Winterfell with Jane Poole, who kind of, Sansa's kind of taken that little bit of a storyline. She, the Boltons pretended that she was Arya Stark and married her to Ramsay Bolton. But he escapes and he gets captured by Stannis, whose army are waiting near to Winterfell. Winter is really coming in, but he's got all these plans to be taking Winterfell. And in the chapter, Theon is hung up on the wall effectively in Stannis' headquarters in this little village. And as the chapter goes on, it becomes apparent that Stannis has got two real plans for Theon. The first is that Theon is probably as good a spy as he's going to get to what's actually going on in Winterfell. He's only just come out. He's had the confidence of the people right at the inner circle. He can go anywhere in Winterfell and people weren't really suspecting him of anything. So he knows huge amounts about what's going on. And Stannis, as in that chapter, lots of people come in and go out all the time. And Stannis is like, you're sort of like asking him questions and just trying to get bits of information out of him. So this is clearly the first thing, is he's trying to understand what's the plan that the Boltons have got. How many soldiers are there? What's morale like? Who's going to be coming out and attacking when and why? He's asking these tactical, strategic questions about what's happening, and Theon is telling him. So that's the first thing. He's trying to get information out of him. The second is that we have this situation where the North still think that Theon killed the two Stark boys, Bran and Rickon, and he hasn't told anyone he didn't. So they want him dead. And Stannis is desperately trying to get all of the North on his side at this point. So he is holding on to Theon for as long as he can before he will hand him over and effectively get him killed, because this is what the Northerners who are with him are wanting. And he thinks that this will show that he's on their side. He's also doing things like he sent Jane Poole, who everyone thinks is Arya, up to the wall to where Jon Snow is, because he thinks he's reuniting Arya with Jon, again, to try and get people on side. So that's his plan. Get information from him and then eventually kill him, or let the Northerners kill him. But what will become of him, I think, is going to be slightly different, because where that chapter ends is you get Asha, Yara, comes in and has a conversation, and she basically suggests that Theon is taken to the weirwood tree nearby to be killed. And incidentally, the ravens there seem to be agreeing there. They're doing this chorus in the background. The implication is that perhaps this is Bloodraven working through them to try and influence events. I think then that what we're going to see is that, yes, Theon probably will be taken to that weirwood tree, but I don't think he will be killed then. I think Stannis will be planning it, but I don't think he will be killed at that point. I think that something will happen at the weirwood tree. We've had so many hints of Bran talking through the weirwood tree and so on, that something big has to happen. Then we've already had Theon being talked to through a weirwood tree, so I think that there is certainly a bit of foreshadowing of that going on. And I think that the Boltons will take the initiative at some point. So I can see that Theon will get out from that problem that he's in, being what may well be about to be sacrificed to the weirwood tree. I think that he will escape. I think it may well be the weirwood tree or some other combination of events mean that it becomes clear that he didn't actually kill those Starks. And I suspect that they will release him off with Asher to go and do what roughly what they're doing on the show. So that's where I see it will all sort of tie up. Theon's journey is going to be similar to what it is on the show, but it will be going a slightly different roundabout route because there's the more direct interactions there with Stannis. Mike with $8 I think that is 26. I don't know if it was you or someone else I saw who was tuning in from Australia, which I thought was, and saying it was 3 a.m. there. So I changed this time to do more Europe-friendly time, and the Australians are still watching in the middle of the night, which is commitment. The question is, what's your opinion on extended battle scenes expected in Season 8? I'm expecting a lot, but no, I prefer more focus on political intrigue and mediation. Okay, good question. I think, yes, there will be extended battle scenes. I think this is something that is part of the show. And I think it's something that the show has generally done well at. Things like the Battle of the Blackwater were brilliant. The Battle of the Bastards was an exceptional piece of TV. And this is when the medium is moving away from being an adaptation of a book series, which what it was to start with, and a lot more towards a TV show feel. They're moving more and more to doing things in a TV show way, which sometimes is not so good because it means you miss out, as you say, an awful lot of the political intrigue and mediation. There's no traveling anymore, I've noticed. We just don't get to see any of that kind of stuff going on. But the flip side, the good side of that, is that they do get to do the things that work really well on TV. For example, the last episode of Season 6, whatever it was, when you get that fantastic long scene leading up to the wildfire blowing up the Great Sept of Baelor. Shifting from character to character, no real dialogue, just looking at Cersei's face, seeing the mountain stopping Tommen going, the High Sparrow just sort of moving around, what's happening underneath the Great Sept, all of that stuff going on, just being shown, switching from one place to another, built up. And for me, that was an excellent piece of TV that you could not do in a book because you can't shift around perspectives that quickly and show things from these different perspectives that quickly. George R. R. Martin does things chapter by chapter by chapter, not just sort of like shifting a point of view around all the time. So that said, I think that we will definitely have long battles in Season 8. I think that's necessarily going to be the case. I think that they may well be excellent bits of cinematography. I think they may well be really good, like the Battle of the Bastards. I certainly hope so. In terms of what that means for the plotting, I share your concern that perhaps this might mean that we get less actual plot development, character development, and actually is a lot more focused on the sort of the exciting things happening on screen. What my biggest fear, I've said this several times, my biggest fear is that the whole thing descends into a big battle with the White Walkers and the humans have to win the battle in order to survive. That is not, I am 100% convinced, how the books are going to finish. The resolution of this is not going to be that that the humans figure out a way to destroy the bad guys, and then they destroy the bad guys and the world's safe again. That's not how it's going to happen. And I hope that's not how it's going to happen on the show. So I'm excited for the extended battle scenes if they are like the really good battle scenes we had. But I don't think that, well, I have the reservation that perhaps this might lead to less of the more nuanced stuff that we had in earlier seasons. Marvin Martin, thank you so much. Won't human nature just rebuild the broken wheel? Well, quite possibly. It depends on what you count as being the wheel. The wheel, this is a show quote, obviously, from Dany, talking about have to break the wheel. She's talking there not about getting rid of, we have to be quite clear here, she's not talking about getting rid of a monarchy. She wants to be the ruler of Westeros. So when we're talking about breaking the wheel, she does not mean what we might think of as breaking the wheels, changing the whole system. She just means that actually nobody else is going to be challenging. It's going to be her and then presumably her descendants in her mind ruling after her. Will human nature just rebuild a broken wheel? Well, quite possibly, but how that looks and how that impacts will be a result of what the new governance nature of the Seven Kingdoms actually is. Are they going to carry on having an absolute monarch, in which case, yes, I can't see any other way than this kind of petty squabbling would just carry on. Are they going to come up with a way that might actually give them a chance to discuss issues rather than just fight each other? I hope so. Human nature will be impacted by what the structures that they have to work around are. Had another super chat from Helena von Lunstein. Make Mordor great again. Thank you so much. €6.66. That's normally LML's amount. Can we have a moment for Sir Acker Herr Pounce in German? Justice for Herr Pounce. Yeah, so sad news, if you didn't pick up on it, take my glasses off for this announcement. Sad news is Sir Pounce is dead. Has been confirmed. So all of these wild rumors that Sir Pounce the cat is somebody important, a spy or a Azor Ahai himself, tragically, in the show at least, are not a case. So yes, thank you very much. It's a big loss for the show, it has to be said, and more for the fandom. What else have we got? We had another super chat I just saw. Klaus Richter with €20. Thank you so much. No question, just support. That's incredibly generous of you. Okay, let's dip into another question from my patrons. Susan Dunkel, oh yes, I saw this one and thought I might have to talk for a while on this one. Susan Dunkel, I would like your best guess on the final pyre, treason, and mount to love. Thank you. Now, the context for this is in the books when Dany goes to the House of the Undying, she has a whole series of complicated visions. The show really, really simplified this. I think they did a good job, actually, but they did really simplify it. In the books, Dany gets, I can't remember exactly how many, but you can count something like 25 discrete visions of different things. And then voices come at her when she reaches the Undying and say a huge amount of really quite enigmatic things. But this bit here is referring to, and I got the quote so that we all know what we're talking about, the slightly prophetic sounding 3 fires you must light, 1 for life, 1 for death, and 1 to love. 3 mounts you must ride, 1 to bed, 1 to dread, and 1 to love. 3 treasons will you know, 1 for blood, once for gold, and once for love. So the big guessing game here is, what do all of these things mean? What are these mounts? What are the fires? What are the treasons? Which of them have already happened? Which of them have yet to happen? Now, I did a rather confusingly titled video ages ago on this one, which I think I called something along the lines of "Will Jon Kill Dany?" If you ignore the title, the main focus of that is trying to break down what all of these different things are that Dany saw in the House of the Undying, and these sort of words here. One of the conclusions I reached is that most of these things here are related to the visions that she's seen, the kind of the snapshots she's got. And on the basis of that, we can start trying to pick together what some of these things are that might have happened. The three fires, the first two at least, I think are quite straightforward. Three fires must you light, one for life, one for death, and one to love. Now, Dany does a lot of things with fire, but the reality is, in terms of her personally setting light to stuff, it actually doesn't happen that much. In fact, it's only happened twice that I know of in the show, once so far in the books. The first was when she lit the funeral pyre for Khal Drogo, which obviously led to the birth of her dragons. That, I think, is the fire she must light for life, brought life forward. Then there's one she must light for death. I think the second fire that we see her light is the one when she's over there with the Dothraki, much later, and she is their prisoner, but then she sort of knocks over the fire that's there and sets fire to the hut, and she burns them all down. There is a snapshot of what looks like the immediate aftermath of that in a vision that she gets here in the House of the Undying. So it's not happened yet in the books, but I think it very clearly will happen. So that, I think, is the second fire, which leaves a fire to love. Then we've got three mounts you must ride, one to bed, one to dread, and one to love. The one to bed, quite clearly, I think, is the horse, the white horse that she is given by Khal Drogo. That's given a lot more emphasis in the books, it has to be said. This is quite an important part of her for the first book. And she rides that horse literally to bed, to her wedding bed. So that, I think, is quite clear. The second one to dread, she rides Drogon. Now, obviously, dragons are to dread, but I think increasingly we're starting to see the links between Drogon and Balerion the Black Dread. They're both dark dragons, black dragons. They're both huge. There are a lot of similarities that came out even more in Fire and Blood. I've done various videos that sort of pick up on this, but I think particularly using the word dread there, this is quite clearly for me, this is Drogon. So the third thing she must ride is something to love. Then there are three treasons that she will know, one for blood, one for gold, and one for love. Now, this one I think is the most uncertain of them all. I think clearly one treason she's known is Ser Jorah. I think that is probably the one for gold, even though Jorah wasn't being paid for it. He did try and get a price for his betrayal, and the price being the forgiveness of what he'd done before, and a chance to start again in Westeros. This was a deal that he was trying to strike with Varys, and he betrayed for that, so it was for a reward. That kind of feels like being a betrayal for gold. One for blood, I don't know, there are a lot of different candidates that I could go through, but I think that the thing that I would focus on then is the fact that it seems like the last three things here are all for love. There is a fire she must light for love or to love. There must be a mount she must ride to love, and there is a treason that she will know for love. So I think those things are probably connected. Now, my best guess, and this is just a guess, is that the third mount is probably going to be in the books. It's going to be Ghost. I think that she will mount that to love, to Jon. I think it's very clear that love affair that's on the show will also be in the book. So I think that there will come a point, perhaps near the end, where she has to ride something else to get to love. And I think the most obvious answer for that is Ghost. Then we've got Treasons, Once for Love, and also Fire That She Must Light. I think that the imagery with Azor Ahai plunging the sword Lightbringer into his love, pulling it forth with it, a flame, is going to play out in some way in the books. That doesn't mean that I necessarily think that literally Jon is going to plunge a sword into Dany and then it's going to burst into flame or anything like that. But I think figuratively, that is what is going to happen. Now, there will be some kind of fire going on there connected with Jon. And I think it makes sense for it to be connected with a betrayal for love. It might not be, he might be betraying her love. He might be betraying her because he loves something more, like the rest of his family, for example. But I think that those three things are going to be connected. All of that said, that is, you asked for my best guess, that's my best guess. All of that said, this is written in deliberately vague language. So we shouldn't try and do what I've just done, which is sort of say, this is definitely going to be that, that is definitely going to be that. But it makes it, what it will be, we will be able to look back on, I think, and say, well, it was that. In the same way we can look back on a mount to ride to bed makes sense. We can see what that is. A mount to ride to dread makes sense. We can look back. I think we'll be able to look back on this and be able to interpret it rather than use it as a way to guide stuff in the future. I think that's one of the key points that's come out from Dany's time there in the House of the Undying, is that she actually, although it's really useful, really interesting, she's not actually managed to get much from it. It's not helped her in any particular way. So that's my best guess. I hope that one helped. Marvin Martin, thank you so much for the super chat. Dany thinks she is barren and the last of her line. What's her plan to pass the torch so Realm and kids don't kill each other? Will Euron ride a Kraken? Few questions there. I think on the show, she hasn't yet decided clearly about what her succession plan is. We had a wonderful conversation with Tyrion, and Tyrion starts trying to suggest a few different options about, they have got different ways of doing it at the Wall or with the Ironborn. Maybe we could try a few different things there. So I don't think she's got a plan, is the short answer. In the books, I think that is actually still so far removed from where she is. She's currently off in the Dothraki Waste there. She's almost given up the plot of Dany in herself is that she's almost given up on invading Westeros in the books. And what we will see happen over the course of her chapters in the next book when it comes out is her regaining her Targaryenness. And this is what a lot of Quaith's messages to her are about regaining her Targaryenness and therefore gaining hold once more of this drive to invade Westeros. So in the books, I don't think she's thinking about that at all either. Will Euron ride a Kraken? Possibly, but I think that we need to start moving away from the association of Euron just with the Greyjoys and just with Krakens and things like that. He has got his sights set higher. He sees in his visions, he sees himself as a god defeating all other gods. He doesn't see himself as a representation of the drowned god. Others around him may, but he doesn't. He sees himself as a god. He will use whatever is there. He's trying to get hold of a dragon. That doesn't mean that he thinks he's a Targaryen. He wants to get hold of a dragon because dragons are big and cool and powerful. If he can get hold of a Kraken, he will get hold of a Kraken. But it's not that he is himself personally attached to the Greyjoy name or the religion of the drowned god. So will Euron ride a Kraken? Possibly, but at the moment I think his biggest plan is trying to ride a dragon. There was, I think I saw another super chat. Linda Pursuit again. Thank you, Linda. You're being incredibly generous. Thank you so much. $50 is amazing. Thank you. Do you think there's any connection between the Night King's dead horse display and Khal Drogo telling Daenerys that a king does not need a chair to sit upon, he only needs a horse? My kingdom for a horse. Shakespeare quote at the end there. This is a show thing. So in the show, there are lots of pictures of them sitting on their horses. The Night King there on his horse. The books, we haven't got this discrete character called the Night King. We've also seen a huge amount less of the others than we have on the show. So I think it's too early to say in terms of what show imagery, what book imagery we might be talking about. In terms of the show, yeah, I think there may well be a little bit of a hint there, an echo of it, that does seem to be where the Night King is kind of placing himself. He's first riding a horse, then he's riding a dragon. For me, that there is, if you take that kind of progression, that's actually more of an echo of Dany herself than kind of like an echo of Khal Drogo. In terms of the, I'll come on to that in just one second, because in terms of the actual throne, if there is a throne, it's not there. They're moving around at the moment, so they're not going to be carting a throne around with them. His reign and rule is over whatever he comes across, and he brings the winter with him. So if you're looking for symbolism, it's not a throne. The king does not need a throne. He merely needs to be in charge of his domain. But I said I would come back to that idea about the symbolism of matching the Night King with Dany. I think in the show, and I think I've got a question about this a little bit later, that I'll run over again when we get to it. But on the show, we have this balance idea. And we've got Dany on a dragon, we've got the Night King on a dragon, and then we've got one spare dragon. Now, the spare dragon, I think, is going to be ridden by Jon. And Jon is the balance between fire and ice. So we've got fire with Dany, ice with the Night King, Jon being both fire and ice, has his own dragon. So I think that is the symbolism that they're going for here. Rather than he only needs a horse, which I certainly get. I get that, and I think that works really well as a callback to Khal Drogo. But I think what they're driving at more is this balance of the three dragon riders: the Night King with ice, Dany with fire, and Jon ice and fire. Okay, let's just have a quick chat in the chat. Secret of the Citadel saying, don't forget we are doing on Wednesday, we're doing the GNC on Wednesday as well as House Hightower. Well, I haven't forgotten. I will get back to you about that as well. Just I'll pick up on a couple of quick questions. Just in the chat, Sean MC says, hey Robert, if you believe the Iron Throne will be destroyed or no longer used, who do you believe will be the last person to sit upon it? I go for Euron. What do you think it will be? That is, I'll be honest, it's not something I've thought about, who will be the last person to sit on it. Euron's probably quite a good shout. I think there might be a difference in the show and the books. I mean, in the books, I think there's a fair chance that Fagon may take King's Landing. I think that obviously Cersei is probably the most likely person to be last sitting on there, but all the hints are that there's going to be some kind of link up between Cersei and Euron in the books as in the show, and Euron will be playing Cersei. Well, they'll both think they're playing each other, but Euron will be playing Cersei a lot more. So I think, yes, that's entirely possible. If we're thinking of how might Euron die, sitting on the Iron Throne that is sort of in his vision with all of these dead gods around him, I could certainly see him creating that situation and then being killed by dragonfire from above. That would appear to be quite an appropriate end for him. I think we need to think of an appropriate end for him. Let's have a quick look. Kelso Sunshine says, can Jon ride Drogon while Dany is still alive? Normally the bond is between one dragon rider and one dragon. That's the way it works. I think that we have to remember the last dragon is Rhaegal, which is obviously named after Rhaegar, Jon's father, and I think that all the hints therefore are that is who Jon's going to be riding. So Dany riding Drogon, obviously Drogo, who has got connections to her. Then we get Viserys, who was, let's say, not a nice piece of work. The Night King is a little bit more tenuous, but he's also not a little bit not a good piece of work. And so we get Jon riding the dragon named after his father. That kind of works for me, I have to say. And Wheezy Squeezebox with a highly important question: will the wine run out in King's Landing? What effect will this have on Cersei? I think that she will prioritize making sure that the wine is there. If she ran out of it, I think that it's probably fair to say that she would go into some quite serious withdrawal. Although it's worth pointing out that the wine in the Middle Ages was a lot less potent, a lot less strong than the wine that we drink today. It was just a general part of the diet for the upper classes, that and beer, again, particularly for the lower classes, because it helped keep the liquids pure from impurities and things like that. So that's why they were doing it. But good question. I've got my wine for afterwards, just ready and waiting to go. Let's go back to a question or two from my patrons. We've got Frown Pouch says, finally read Fire and Blood. In it, the Tully line includes Elmo, Kermit, and Grover. Is our author telling us the Tullys are Muppets? Well, I think this is George R. R. Martin having a bit of fun. To be honest, I think that there are so many characters. If you can't drop a few in there, there are other amusing character names if you care to dig through them all. There are hundreds and hundreds of them. So I think it's, I don't think he's trying to give us a subliminal message about a particular house. I think this is just him having a little bit of fun with the names. Melissa Bauman, or possibly Bowman, says, had a thought today, will the death of the dragons be necessary to save Daenerys and her child in season 8? Now, at some point I will come back to this question of, will Dany have a child? I think we've kind of, within the community, the fandom community, kind of bought into this idea that that Dany will have a child because of the way that the show have presented it, and we've kind of accepted it as fact. I don't think we necessarily should accept it as fact. If she is pregnant, then we have to accept that the final season would have to be at least, cover the period of at least 9 months in order for her to have that baby, and in order for it to play much of a role, then we're looking at covering even longer period of time. That may well be the case, but that also places a huge amount of restriction on what Dany will be able to do for most of the season. There was incidentally, or at least for chunks of it when she's heavily pregnant, there was incidentally in Fire and Blood, there were a lot of instances of whether or not Jaehaerys would let Alysanne ride when she was pregnant, and things along those lines. This came up more than once, and did make me wonder whether or not there might be a sort of a foreshadowing for a pregnant Dany. But in terms of the question with whether the death of the dragons will be necessary to save Daenerys and her child in season 8. I don't think that that is going to be the way that this goes. I think that Dany will die, I think, but I don't think so. I don't think the dragons will die to save her. I think there is an outside chance that if there is a child, that child will live as this kind of beacon of hope. I think LML, who was on my live stream on Thursday, he said, there's only 3 real reasons why there might be a child. One of the reasons is to provide hope for the future. One of the reasons is to be sacrificed, and I can't remember what he suggested the third reason might be, but I certainly don't think that the dragon's death is necessary to save Daenerys, because I don't think Daenerys will survive. Torsten D. Is there possibly a direct connection between Valar Morghulis, Valar Dohaeris, and the White Walkers and their whites, considering that they are men who've died and now must serve? Or is there a thematic link? So, good question. This I covered a while ago now, probably a year or so ago now. I did a whole series about the Faceless Men and what they were up to, and the Maesters and the huge amounts, things like that. And I don't think my view has changed since then when it comes to the Faceless Men. We often tend to view things like all men must die, all men must serve as kind of catchphrases. They're not catchphrases. These are, if anything, catechisms. These are statements of faith, statements of belief by what is effectively a religious order, the Faceless Men. They worship the god of dead, the god of the dead, the god of death, who they see in aspect across all religions. And so they think that overrides everything. Everyone must die in the end, and they're happy to help people towards death. But I think that the overarching thing that they would get disconcerted by or oppose is an idea that their fundamental tenet that all men must die, everyone must die, is challenged. Now, that would be challenged by death not being the end. So what you're looking at from their perspective, from the perspective of people who worship the god of death effectively, believe that everyone must die, they will look around the world and they will go, hang on a minute, there are north of the wall, coming south of the wall, there's this huge army where people are killed, but they don't die because they're brought back as ice whites. They will look at the followers of the Lord of Light, Melisandre and the like, Thoros. They are stopping people dying. Beric is like a one-man heresy as far as they will be concerned, because he's not dying. He keeps on being prevented from dying, being brought back from dying. They will see things like Lady Stoneheart. They will see what Qyburn's doing down in King's Landing, creating the mountain. They will see all of this as heresy. So I do not think that they will be, or they are connected to the others. They will be opposed to the others in the same way they will be opposed to anyone else who is preventing people from dying. So that is what I think is the thematic link. It's not that they're on the same side at all. I think that they will be violently opposed to them. Klaus Richter, 10 euros, thank you so much. How sure can we be that the Night's King was killed? All we know is what Brandon the Breaker told us. Can we trust him? So, book question. This is relating to the legend of the Night's King. And in the legend of the Night's King, we have how he was defeated. He was defeated by a force of Winterfell, by Brandon the Breaker and Joramun, the king of the wildlings, effectively, and they kind of joined forces. And somewhere along the line, the Horn of Winter got blown, and the Night's King rule was ended. Now, you're right, it does not specifically say, and he was killed, and therefore we can never see him again. It is entirely possible that actually what happened is that he got pushed back in some way. Now, can we believe what Brandon the Breaker told us? Well, he's not specifically telling us himself what he is doing. What he is a character within a legend. So what we've got going on is, pardon me, is, as we have with all of the legends from the Age of Heroes, where there is clearly a kernel of truth here, there's a grain of truth here. The story has been told and retold and retold, and we shouldn't take it as literal truth. Not everything that was there, I'm sure, happened literally as the legend tells us. So even if it had said, and then Brandon the Breaker cut off his head and burned him and he will never come back, we shouldn't necessarily agree that that's the case. So the short answer is that we can't be sure that the Night's King was killed. We can be sure that whatever happened with the Night's King, and I think there probably was a thing that happened with the Night's King, it happened connected with the Night's Watch at the Night Fort, lots of links there, that was defeated in some way. The reign and rule of that was ended. I think we can take it that it was ended by a combination of humans, because from the Starks and the Wildlings, and personally, I think that we can also take it that the Horn of Winter was involved in some way. This all connects up with my the Dead in Winterfell and the Horn of Winter theory that I would send people to if they're interested, but I don't think we can necessarily trust the detail, but we can trust the overall feel of what happened, if that makes sense. And I wouldn't put it beyond the books for the Night's King to be coming back as and to make an appearance, whether we know it exactly or not, but to be part of whatever is the other's advance in the books. Stormy4400, $20, thank you so much, saying just because it's worth it. You're very kind, thank you, that's really nice. Let's dig into a few questions in the chat now. Carrie Nevers saying, I'm one of those people who think both Jon and Dany will survive. Dany, because I don't think she'll have that foreshadowed baby before the show's end, and Jon, because he's the only one who would really break the wheel. Yeah, I don't think I'd necessarily agree with all of that, but I think that's a good point. I think that the idea that Jon breaking the wheel, I think, is a really good one. I think that he does not want to rule. This is one of the overriding things about him, and he therefore, for that reason, might actually end up being quite a good ruler. So I don't put it beyond the realms of possibility that that's kind of like a theme which will come up again in the books. But in terms of them both surviving with a baby and ruling the nation as a nice happy family, I personally can't see that happening. That would be too much like everything just returning to as it was. Now, maybe we might say that it's all a big cycle and really it should do, and the Targaryens should be ruling and all the rest of it, but I can't see that being how it was. The starting point for this, and one of the big themes of Game of Thrones, is that people struggling for the Iron Throne, struggling to sit in power over everyone else, that is damaging the kingdom immensely. And it doesn't matter who sits on the Iron Throne, it is that concentration of power that is the problem, and it is the desire to get to that power that is the problem. It's very much a link across to the One Ring in the Lord of the Rings. It's a thematic link going on there. So that I personally see as probably the biggest reason why we won't just see this big happy family ruling at the end, because this has to be shown to be worthless, or we're just going back to where we were before. Marvin Martin asking, if not a god, could Euron become more than human? Well, yes, I guess. I think he certainly will gain some pretty impressive powers. I think that what he's doing in the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter clearly is some huge magic. Lots of sacrifice, blood sacrifice is required for big magic. We know this. He seems to be deliberately trying to provoke a huge sea battle. He's deliberately tied priests from lots of different religions onto the fronts of boats so that they will die. And he is, and indeed, the woman who is pregnant with his own child, which you could argue is king's blood. So he's trying to do some big toxic, horrendous, magic-y thing going on down there, which will undoubtedly make him more powerful. I think I would take the George R. R. Martin's words that we will not see the gods walking on Westeros in this story to mean that I don't think Euron is going to achieve his dream. He may think he does, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he will. Just to see if I can see any other. Kelso Sunshine says, Stormy4400 raises a good question. Can the resurrected have children? Sounds suspect. What we don't know is the short answer. What we do know is that probably the best example we have of this is Beric, who is brought back 6 times, and he basically describes how bits of him stop working one after the other. The blood's not running through, pumping through his veins anymore. He can't remember things. He is less and less him. I think that it's very unlikely that he would be able to have children, and therefore we have to ask the question about Jon. Now, Jon, I think, is a different case. They didn't really do this in the show, but in the books, I and lots of other people are pretty convinced that the way that Jon will survive is that when he's killed, he wogs himself into ghost, and then when he's resurrected, he just comes back from ghost. So he won't have that being pulled back. He won't being resurrected in the same way as other people. So he probably will have a different experience of it. So I don't think we can take what we've seen from others as necessarily being the case for Jon. Does that mean he can still have children? Quite possibly. The truth of the matter is that we do not have the science behind it, and it's magic. Therefore, there isn't really so much science behind it. If Jon can have children, then he may well have children, but I think that's the kind of thing that George R. R. Martin could make up without a specific bit of logic behind it. Riley Gowan, $5 Canadian. This is the first live chat I've ever been able to catch of yours. No question, just wanted to let you know that you do fantastic work. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm so glad that this live stream has been able to have people who don't normally watch the live streams, because I've been keeping to a set time, which I think is really good because it helps people know when I'm going to be live streaming. But I do appreciate that means that some people who can't make that time don't get to see them. So that's why I'm trying to do a few at different times, and I'm really glad that you managed to make this one. So Roland de Stark, $5. Just wanted to say great questions and great chat, everyone. I agree. There's some fantastic questions going on here. We are, as I suspected, dotting about all over the place, and I really enjoy doing these just solo Q&As because I can move through a lot of questions. I can pick up stuff from the chat, and the questions can come in about anything, and I really enjoy that, and I can tell you guys do as well. Nicola Juracan saying, Geek Chat 1, I subscribe to your YouTube channel. I would highly recommend other people do that as well. If you don't know Geek Chat 1, JR was on this channel a couple of weeks ago on my live stream, and Geek Chat 1 is not just focus on Game of Thrones, but a huge number of different fandoms. It's a great Facebook group. Please do go and check that one out. And there's also a YouTube channel as well now. Linda Prasuta. Linda, you're being incredibly generous. Thank you so much. This is another $50. Thank you. Do you think Bran can fix the broken horn of winter? If that's the horn that Sam or Jon has. Bran the Breaker, Bran the Fixer on many levels. Yes, I think probably he can. I think that, so on the show, no, is the short answer. On the show, the horn got a little shot of it when Sam discovered that cache of dragonglass, and we saw that there was a horn there, but they've not done anything with it since, so it's not going to happen on the show, sorry. In the books, though, I am personally convinced that the fact that Sam, and we get these little name checks of it every now and then, so we know that Sam has still got it. He's still got it. He got, when he was in Bravos, he sold everything he owned except for that one broken horn. And so we know that he has still got this horn. It definitely will have a role that it needs to play at some point soon. And because it was in that cache of stuff left almost certainly by Bloodraven, then it clearly has an important role because he was leaving things that would be useful for the Night's Watch. It clearly has an important role for the defense of humanity. Now, the word that I find fascinating here is broken, because it's horn, it was described, it didn't have any, it wasn't sort of caved in or anything like that. There was no reason to think it wouldn't work, but they tried blowing it and it didn't. And then it's described as being a broken horn, which is an odd thing to say. So my guess is that it's not physically broken, it is magically broken in some way. And it's entirely possible that that means that it can only be used by certain people, perhaps. Perhaps a true Stark is the only kind of people who can do it. I think Bran is probably in the best place to understand what the horn is. He can probably see back in time to what's going on and why it is there, and therefore how it got broken in the first place. And the moment that you can work out how something got broken in the first place, was it a deliberate thing to prevent it being misused in the future? Or was it an accidental thing? My guess is that actually it was a deliberate thing to prevent it being misused, because it is an incredibly powerful thing. And the people, Brandon, the Breaker, didn't want others to be using it lightly. So I think that's what it is. And I think, yes, you're probably right that Bran may well be able to fix it, or at the very least know what needs to be done. And you're right, Bran the Fixer does kind of balance well with Bran the Breaker. Eric Grabowski saying, right, not broken, only magically forgot. Yeah, I think it's a magical thing rather than a physically broken. D. Vincent, what would be your worst nightmare of an ending for Game of Thrones? Any specific plots that you don't want to end in a certain way, referring to the show? Yeah, so I've hinted at it already. I think that there are two things. The first is that I personally need a resolution on the biggest in the show unanswered question, which is what the White Walkers are wanting, what they're trying to achieve. I don't want them just to be a faceless, motiveless, that's a bunch of bad guys just coming down killing people because they want to do it. That's not the kind of characters that George R.R. Martin creates, and I hope that that's not what they will be like on the show. Similarly, so in terms of nightmare, not ever knowing what was going on there would be horrible. I need to understand what was going on. Secondly, the idea that as I was alluding to earlier, that this can be resolved with a big battle. I 100% believe George R.R. Martin won't end A Song of Ice and Fire with the resolution to it all being, and there was a big fight, and then Jon with his magic sword killed the big bad guy, and then everything was okay again. That would not work for me at all. I don't think that's going to how it's going to be end in the books. I hope that they don't use that as a shortcut on the show. So that's that for show things. Those are what my worst nightmares would be. So Wiz the Smiths says, why leave such a hugely significant horn buried north of the wall? It seems a little careless. Maybe it's not that important. I think it probably is, but for different reasons than many think. So this wasn't just randomly left north of the wall is the answer to this question. It was wrapped in what looks like a Night's Watch cloak. It was buried very recently dug earth, which in the frozen north you can tell these things quite easily. And so whoever did it knowing that the Night's Watch were about to be there and find it. And in the books, it's very clear that Ghost finds it and takes people to it. So actually what seems to have been happening, given the clear hints that Bloodraven himself can sometimes wog into Ghost and make Ghost go and do stuff, is that what happened is that Bloodraven got someone like Cold Hands to bury it just before the Night's Watch got there. Then he got Ghost to go and take them to find it. And it wasn't just randomly left out there for ages, just whoever might find it. It was that Bloodraven deliberately wanted them to get hold of it, and he gave it to them. That's what seems to have been going on there. I think I just had one other super chat. Oh, yes. So Riley Gowan, thank you so much again. Have to give again, you being the first person to pronounce my last name correctly on first read. I hope I did it again on the second read there. I do apologize if I changed it, but you're very welcome. Lady Farsnow, hi there, Lady Farsnow. Hoping to get together again soon. Yes, so Lady Farsnow was on my live stream a while ago now. So yeah, absolutely, we'll try and sort something out. Q&A, do you think we will see Jon actually ride a dragon like Dany controlling Rhaegal on the show? Yes, I do. I think that I talked about this a little bit earlier. I think that on the show, I don't think they'll be able to resist the visual of it, to be honest, of Jon riding a dragon. I think that they'll definitely go with this. And it works thematically as well. It's Rhaegal, it's named after his father. It's ice, fire, and Jon, the third part of this being the balance of ice and fire. So yes, definitely think that we will see Jon actually ride a dragon. That's going to be one of the big visual moments of season 8, I think. Marvin Martin, $5, thank you. Speaking of Bran and time travel, could all the legends and myths be prophecies and clues instead about this present story and what is coming? Yeah, so Gemma from Secrets of the Citadel, who I don't know whether she's still in the chat, but she and I did a video last week. I think it's part of my occasional series that I do with some other content creators called My Favorite Theory. She brought a theory that sort of reflects that, and we discussed that for quite some time. It was fascinating stuff, the idea that perhaps Bran had gone back in time with the stories of what happened in the present time. And so those are the legends that we get today, which is why things seem to echo so much. So Bran told them about when he went north to find the children of the forest with his faithful wolf and thing, direwolf, and that got turned into the story of the last hero. And then he talks about a character with a flaming sword, and that's Beric. And then he talks about Jon and what he's doing, and that becomes Azor Ahai, or the Prince that was promised, or anything like that. So that's the idea, is that actually these are things that happened in the present that Bran has described in the past, and then they got handed down over time. So I came to the conclusion that I liked the idea, I liked the thinking, but I don't believe that Bran will time travel back and change things. What we seem to be in is a closed loop world where things that that have happened always have happened, and things that are going to happen being affected by the past already will have been affected. I didn't explain that very well, but the best simple example is on the show. There's a similar example in the books, but on the show, Bran calls out to his father when he sees him at the Tower of Joy, and Ned turns round and clearly hears it. Now, that is Bran going back into the past and affecting things in the past in a small way. But actually, Ned always turned around at that point, so he's not actually changing a thing, he's just making something happen that had already happened. As Bloodraven says, the ink is dry. So you can go back and try and change things, but actually you're only making things happen that already have happened, or already will happen. And then Hodor is the next step on with that. Hodor is always living in the present moment of he will be holding the door, and that created a closed time loop there as well. And so the whole of this is in a closed time loop. We're not going to affect things by going into the past. We might just set up what they do actually become. I hope that makes sense. We went into a lot more detail on that that sort of podcast video. So if you want to go and check that one out, please do. Rion, I never know how to pronounce that one, 55 euros. Thank you so much. That's incredibly generous. I left this question on Patreon, but because I really appreciate this live stream, I'd like to ask you again. I did get the question and I was going to come to it, but thank you. That's really kind of you. You may have been asked this question 1,000 times before. Where do the White Walkers, including the Night King, come from? And above all, why, and why yet, or why now? Okay, this, as I said earlier, this is, for me, the big unanswered question on the show and in the books. Now, I think in terms of the first bit, where do they come from? In the books, I think it's going to be similar, probably not exactly the same, but similar to what we saw on the show, which was that they were created by the Children of the Forest as a weapon against humanity in some way. That's because they are pretty much what you would design if you were going to design a weapon against humanity. They are immune to the metals and weapons that humans usually use. If they manage to kill a human, they can actually turn the human's numbers against them by raising that human to be on their side. They are stronger than humans, and they basically have everything you would expect in terms of a super soldier against humanity. As we see on the show, we see them coming down and there's nothing humanity can do to stop them. But what they also did to sort of add to this, what I think is quite clear hint, they gave the others, the White Walkers, these kind of little weaknesses. And the weaknesses are actually things that, like, that they are very vulnerable to dragonglass, and dragonglass is what the Children of the Forest used for their weapons. So the Children of the Forest have created something that they must have suspected might be slightly outside of their control, but thought that they would be able to kill them because they built in this little weakness. And it would appear that there's some kind of problem with them crossing running or open water. And we see that where the Children of the Forest's big, important places, like the Isle of Faces or the Dragonglass mine on Dragonstone, these are on islands. So if you are wanting to protect your special places, then that would be a thing that you might also want to plug into there. So I think that it all adds up, that that's what they were originally. And I think that the pact between humans and the Children of the Forest, the pact was very much a matter of the others have got out of control, and they realize that there's a common enemy for the Children of the Forest and humans. And so that was what was going on there. And then after that, through the Age of the Heroes, we see that the Children of the Forest are giving Dragonglass to the humans, to the Night's Watch at the Wall, as a sort of a yearly gift. And the only reason there is because they wanted to help arm them against the others. So I think that's what they were. In terms of what they're wanting, I think that heavy hint in the show is that what they're wanting is connected not just with mass destruction. They don't just want to kill things for the sake of killing things. It is connection with their creation. The symbols that they leave are reflective of the place of their creation. So what they are trying to do in some way is contact their creators. They seem to be, obviously on the show, they seem to be very keen to kill the children of the forest. That may well be the case because this is a long curse. And so I think in the books where they will be wanting to go is to probably to the center of the Weirwood network, which is the Isle of Faces. How they get there, I think that's a slightly different matter, but I think that's where we're going to get the denouement of it. As for why now, I think this is a slightly harder question. They started moving 40 or so years ago, as far as we were aware, when Craster was starting to give them babies. I do wonder, I've got a sort of a nagging thought at the back of my mind. I've said this a lot. At some point, I'm going to do a big video all about Harrenhal, not Harrenhal, Summerhall, and what happened there. I think that did some big magic. Maybe that triggered something. But my current best guess is that this is simply in the same way that we might say, well, why is it that humanity has suddenly got magic and dragons are coming back and there's the prince that was promised and things like that? Because it is the right time and magical things move in these kind of waves. And so in the same way that we might have a kind of a magical wave around humanity, we also have one around the others. So I think that that is probably what's been going on, is that there's just this, maybe they've got some prophecies as well that maybe they can certainly use their powers to see what's going on. They can see what's happening with humans. They can see what movements are going on there. So perhaps they're just doing something preemptive, but perhaps it's just magic moves in these cycles. I fear this might be one of those things that we never get a full answer on. I will be honest. I think that we may just have to accept that this is one of those cycles of magic and life things. Okay, let's have a go back into questions from my patrons. Had some from Maura Lee that I said I was going to get to, so let's do the first one there from Maura. Thank you, Maura. On the show, as well as in the books, Dany was given the 3 eggs, the 3 dragon eggs, for both symbolic and political reasons, as these eggs are symbols of her Targaryen heritage and birthright to rule. We know that in the books it will not be so cut and dried. In the books we might see Jon's possible claim as well as fake Aegon's possible claim. I mentioned this is in my video from a week or so ago when it was about where Dany's 3 dragon eggs came from and what this might mean for the story going forward. And I mentioned, yes, there were some physical symbols of the birthright. So the question is, what physical symbols of that birthright do I think that Jon will have, as well as fake Aegon, if Dany's got the dragons now or was given the dragon eggs? So I think that the answer is that Fagon, this is in the books because obviously he's not on the show, but he will have the sword Blackfire. I think that went missing. It was last known of in the possession of Bittersteel, who was the founder of the Golden Company, and he was also kind of the self-proclaimed holder of this Blackfire inheritance. He didn't seem to leave the sword for the Golden Company because there's no mention of them having this great sword. The leaders of the Golden Company after him certainly aren't wielding it, so he didn't seem to leave it there. What makes sense is if he left it with someone that was like him, he would think, who would choose an appropriate person to give it to reclaim the crown for the sort of Blackfire lineage. Now, I think eventually that got to Illyrio, who has very, very much got that same kind of feeling about him. He is deciding who he thinks should be the inheritor of the sort of the Iron Throne, the Targaryen Blackfire inheritance. And there is, just to sort of add a little tweak onto this, there was in one of the pre-release chapters a while back now, one of the pre-release chapters for A Dance with Dragons. Then George R.R. Martin, it was a Tyrion chapter, and George R.R. Martin read it out. And in that, Illyrio talks about having, we have to talk to Aegon. I need to talk to him about a sword. Now, I can't think of any other sword that could possibly be a subject of a conversation there other than Blackfire itself, the symbol of Targaryen rule. So I think if you add up all of these things and the fact that clearly Illyrio is trying to get Fagon across and to retake the throne, then it makes sense that he is given Blackfire and he can therefore be shown to be the inheritor of the sort of the not just the Blackfire name, but also this was the sword of the Targaryen kings as well. So I think there's that going on. I think the other thing which is possibly floating around is Aegon the Conqueror's crown, which was lost in Dawn, and it wouldn't surprise me if Doran Martell has got that, and then he decides who to give that to. I think we will probably see, given the fact that Quentin Martell, poor Quentin, is not going to return from his attempt to team up with Dany, I think that we will see Dawn team up with Fagon in the books, and I think it's entirely possible, therefore, that he's going to be given Aegon the Conqueror's crown, and so he's going to seem like a very impressive contender, because not only has been trained up to be a king, but he might well be carrying around Blackfire, the sword of the kings, and to have the crown of the kings as well. So I think that's what's going on. In terms of Jon, I don't think he's going to have anything. I honestly don't. I don't think that there's nobody raising him up to be king. The whole point is that it's been a secret, and I think that the people who do know about who he is, people like Howland Reed and Bloodraven, they are much more focused on him focusing to the north rather than him being an inheritor of the Iron Throne, which is at the moment just a little bit of a side issue for them. So I don't think Jon's going to have anything other than the truth on his side. W. Heron, thank you so much for the super chat. Just saying thank you, Win. Excellent. You're very welcome. OCDAC saying Maura Lee is a hell of a supporter in the community. Shout out. Agreed. Thank you, Maura. Let's have a quick look if there are anyone. So Raven Salix in the chat saying, will Arya kill someone important with that Valyrian steel dagger? Well, she did already, obviously, on the show. I think now probably this is just her having a cool weapon that she will be able to fight bad guys with now. It's possible that she will end up going down to try and finish off her list. Remember that the last people on her list are down in King's Landing pretty much now, being Cersei and the Mountain. So I could certainly see her heading down there and trying to kill them with whatever she's got. But I think probably Needle more than that. That's just a sort of a ceremonial thing that it worked well for her to be killing Littlefinger with it, given his history with it. Marvin Martin again, thank you so much. Could the real goal be free the world from closed time loops, Lovecraft, God manipulations, etc.? Magic may die and the world is more boring, but the world is free. Sounds like a bittersweet end to me. Yeah, it's entirely possibly true. I think that we're not going to get too much emphasis on time loops. I talk about it because that's the way of describing what it is that we've seen, but that's not actually been a huge emphasis on what's going on there. That's just a way of understanding what is happening. I think we will see a lot more language in terms of like the ink is dry and things like that, that kind of thing, rather than talking about time loops. Lovecraft god manipulations. I think this is a Euron thing. Yes, I think that the world will be freed from that kind of thing. Magic may die and the world more boring, but the world is free. Sounds like a bittersweet end to me. Yeah, I don't think the magic is going to go completely. I think that some magic can be good magic, but I think that the big destructive bits of magic, like the dragons and like the White Walkers, will be gone. And I think that will make, as you say, for probably a more boring world, but also a safer one. So yeah, I think I agree with you. Let's have another question from one of my patrons. Anime lover Nicole saying, "Hi, can't be there tonight because I'm celebrating my birthday." And I do have a question, and I will rewatch this. Happy birthday, Nicole. I hope you have a lovely time. There are a lot of characters who are pretending to be different people. Sansa as Elaine, old and young Griff as Jon Con Fagon, and so on. Could there be a Lannister in disguise? Maybe Geryon, who failed his quest. Could this be possible, and who could he be? I think his character is very interesting. What's your take on this? I agree his character is a really interesting character. For those who don't know, this is Tyrion's favorite uncle, the Lannister who seems to love him the most. He was a really good and nice character, but also competent and all the rest of it that you normally expect from the Lannisters. He set off for a mission when Tyrion was younger to try and find the family Valyrian steel sword, which was lost in a previous sort of quest by the Lannisters over to Valyria. And he headed off there and he did not return. Now, the question here, therefore, is could he have survived that and come back, but now be disguised as somebody else, perhaps because he's ashamed of not having found it? My instinct is to say probably not. He could have done. I don't think there's any evidence one way or the other, but wherever possible, I try not to see this is one character disguised as another, and then there's a big reveal at the end. I think that, yes, there are a lot of characters who are pretending to be other people, but I think that most of those we know that they're pretending to be other people, like Elaine, Cat of the Cradles, Arya and Sansa, we know that they're pretending to be other people. So I think the amount of surprise, kind of like Scooby-Doo ending, putting off the mask, so I'd have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for you pesky kids, that kind of thing, I think that there will not be huge amounts of. I think that it's an easy literary device, and I don't think George R.R. Martin wants to use easy literary devices all that often. So could Geryon have returned? Well, it's possible. I think it's much more likely, though, that his disappearance is just being used as a very clear example of the fact that Valyria is still a place that you cannot go safely. Because when we get someone like Euron claiming to have been there, then that actually doesn't mean much unless we've got lots of other characters who have been there and not returned, or have returned but with horrible worm things inside them or something like that. So I think he's just part of this larger way of showing that Valyria is not a safe place for humans to go. I'm sorry to disappoint. I think he is a great character, but I think he is gone. Higa Herger, hi there. $5. Thank you so much. That's very kind. I love your content, and it has inspired me to make some of my own. Thank you. Well, you're very welcome, and please do let people in the chat know if have you got a channel? Are you producing stuff? Let people in the chat know. That would be fantastic. I'll be very happy to tweet that out if you let me know about that, and I'll happily send people your way. Let's have another quick look in the chat to see if there are any questions there. So we've got Poisoned Pinup saying, anyone have opinions on whether Rhaegar's birth, the start of the Azor Ahai prophecy, triggered the waking of the White Walkers? He'd be mid-40s if he lived. Coincidence with Craster giving up sons. Yes, this is linked. So this is the tragedy of Summerhall. This is when Rhaegar was born. There was an attempt to do some big magic there. This was Aegon V, Egg, that, as we know him when he was king, he tried to hatch dragons. He was using wildfire. He was also using magic that he could come up with. And the bit that we know is that, yes, he did hatch a dragon, in that Rhaegar was born at that point. But other than that, it just seems to have been a huge failure. The timing issue here is the reason why, or one of the reasons why, I have my suspicions about it, because it is it's quite coincidental that it's around the time. It's not exactly, but it's a little bit before the time when probably the White Walkers were starting to move. Now, does that mean that the link was because of Rhaegar being born? Well, quite possibly. He was in a way a child of prophecy. I don't know. What I am committing to is that it'll probably be the other side of season 8. But I am going to do a full investigation in a video on Summerhall and what happened. I think that there are 2 or 3 very suspicious people there. There's Aerys the Mad King himself, who was around, suspiciously didn't die, and suspiciously loves fire and burning them all, as we know, and also Bloodraven, because if in doubt, blame Bloodraven, and he certainly had at least one lackey there. So there's a lot going on there. Sword in the Darkness is agreeing. I think whatever they did at Summerhall woke the White Walkers. KFA 4303, if human sacrifice is needed to hatch an egg, who would Egg have chosen? This is a good question. If human sacrifice is needed, curiously, we do know 3 people who died there, and they are 3 big and important people. We get Egg himself, we get his eldest son, and we get Sir Duncan the Tall, who is an important person, not just because we have the stories about him, not just because he was the friend of the king. There is some hint of destiny to him that I think we haven't yet fully got a whole handle on. It's just said in passing, I can't remember which of the Duncan Egg novels, novellas, but I was rereading them over the sort of the Christmas period, and one thing that really stood out for me was Dunk reminisces about when he stood once and saw Bloodraven walking by when he was in King's Landing, and Bloodraven turned and looked at him quizzically. And we also get later on in the Mystery Night, we get Bloodraven wondering about what Dunk's role in all of this is. And it's very clear that Bloodraven, who, as we know, very magical, senses something going on with Dunk. There's something happening there. Maybe he's just this person who himself, he's not magical, but he's a touchstone for magical things happening around and about. There, as we know, Brienne is probably a descendant of his. Hodor is probably a descendant of his. They are clearly very important characters. Clearly, his role there with Aegon was very important as well. His role was central in terms of the Second Blackfire Rebellion. That was the whole plot, really, of the Mystery Night, nipping that rebellion in the bud, and he was right there at the center of it. Clearly, he was right there at the center of it in the first book, The Hedge Knight, when he's there effectively changing the line of succession by the death of the dragon who fell on him, as seen in the vision. He is and there's something about him that we don't know the truth of yet, but he is some sort of nexus for important things happening in and around him, and I don't think we yet know all the truth of it. And that's as far as I'm going to go with that. I might do a video on it at some point if I have a few more thoughts. And I honestly can't remember where I started on that one. Oh yes, it was this question or statement of, if human sacrifice is needed to hatch an egg, who would egg have chosen? I wonder whether he didn't actually choose people, but regardless, 3 people died and the sacrifices were made. The clear hint is that Dunk himself sacrificed himself in order to save people. That was in the World of Ice and Fire. That was a clear hint of what happened there. So he actually literally sacrificed himself. So yeah, it's an unfinished thought, but do not just think of Dunk as being this, Dunk the Lunk, thicker than the castle wall. There is more to him. He is some kind of, I'm using the word nexus, but there's something going on with him. Okay, let's dip back into the questions from my patrons. Jen Yu says, do you think Bloodraven took Dark Sister with him when he went beyond the wall? And if so, do you think Arya might end up with it rather than the Valyrian steel dagger she received on the show? I think he definitely took Dark Sister with him north of the wall. We recently had confirmation of what we suspected, and this was in answer, I think it was from a question from Aziz, who has come on this channel more than a couple of times, who asked George R. R. Martin in a Q&A session whether Bloodraven took Dark Sister with him up to the wall, and the answer was yes. That means that he had it when he went sort of ranging, investigating whatever he was looking for north of the wall. It makes absolute sense that he would have taken it with him. Now, that's backed up by the fact that it doesn't seem to be at the wall. The Targaryens would obviously have been very keen to get it back, as they'd lost Blackfire. This was the other Valyrian steel sword that they had, and so they would have been very miffed about the loss of this. So it doesn't seem to have been left there. There's no mention of it at the wall anywhere. Jon takes over the apartments, so as Lord Commander, and he was there. If anyone would have been able to find it out, then he probably would have done. Maester Aemon doesn't mention this at all. So it's not at the wall. Pretty sure of it. Pretty sure it went north with Bloodraven. Pretty sure it's in the cave. He's probably left it there in the cave. Valyrian steel swords, they don't rust like other swords do. They survive for centuries. So it's almost certainly there and in good condition. I think that the fact that Mira grabbed a sword on the way down, and this was on the show, the fact that they just showed that little still of her grabbing a sword on the way out, it had the feel of those other kind of little nods that they've done in the show to stuff that's important in the books, but they just haven't got time and they're just not doing on the show. Like when at the Tower of Joy, they just lingered for a moment on the sword dawn that Arthur Dane had, or as we were talking earlier about the Horn of Winter, they just lingered for a moment on the picture of it. They didn't talk about it at all. They just did that. So Mira taking that sword seems to me to be a hint that something very similar is going to happen in the books. I think that they will get back to Winterfell. I think that the question is who carries Dark Sister. I think that your guess that Arya might have it is quite likely, actually. I think that there's a good chance. I think they reintroduced the cat's paw dagger largely as a device to sort of show, to give her a nice circle on Littlefinger's betrayals to allow Arya to kill him with it. I think that it makes a lot more sense to me that she actually has the sword, which was originally held by Visenya. So it's described as being a slightly lighter sword, a slightly shorter sword. It's not a double-handed sword. I think it's a long sword. So it would work for her as she's smaller. So this is entirely possible, I would say. And Bran may well, if he has it, I could see him saying a similar thing, like it's wasted on a cripple, and giving it to her to actually say, "Oh, I've got this. You'd be good with it." So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know, but it makes a lot of sense for me. We've got, let's quickly go into the chat. Tim F saying, "Hey, Robert." Hi, Tim. Good to see you. What else have we got? Questions. Yeah, so Wizard Smith saying, GRM confirmed at a recent con a Shea from history. Was it a Shea rather than Aziz? Well, Shea is excellent too. As Aziz says, she is the best. And she asked the question, yeah. So the question there was specifically, did he take it to the wall? Not did he take it with him when he went north of the wall? And so George R. R. Martin didn't answer the question of what happened to it afterwards. He just answered the question of did it go up to the wall with Bloodraven when he went up there. Adrian Birchall asking about sabotage. Did the Maesters sabotage Harrenhal? It's one of the possibilities. So I think that there are. I'll set out my initial thinking. I always spoil future videos here when I'm doing live streams. This is where my thinking is at the moment, is that there are 3 possible culprits for what happened at Summerhall. Culprit number 1 potentially is indeed the Maesters. We know that the Maesters, or we can work out the Maesters are against magic. They seem to have had a big role in getting rid of dragons, not the Dance of the Dragons got rid of most of them, but I think they had a role in getting rid of the last, or poisoning the last few dragons. They will have had a vested interest in not wanting dragons to return. They, out of everybody, probably will be the people who are most likely to know what could bring back dragons. They've got huge amounts of knowledge from across the world. And if they discovered that Aegon V was about to do something which might bring, they feared it might bring back dragons, then yes, that gives them a motive. And we know the Maesters were there. The second is possibly Aerys, who became Aerys II. There's a chance, it's not clear, it's not stated, but there's a chance actually that was his place, because the king was at Dragonstone. The next in line would the king at King's Landing. Second in line, or the first in line, gets Dragonstone, and the second in line, it appears, sometimes gets Summerhall. So it's entirely possible that he, at that moment in time, had Summerhall as his personal residence. We know that he likes burning people, and there's a lot more. Secret of the Citadel's got a good lot of thinking around this. If you ever want to check out her videos and thoughts on the subject, that there's a chance, therefore, he could have been involved. He does like burning people, and it would certainly speed up his own personal route to the throne, let's put it that way. And then we get the third one is Bloodraven, because the prophecy, the prince that was promised prophecy, seems to have come, or the channeling down of the prince that was promised prophecy into the Targaryen line, focusing it in on them, seems to have come from Bloodraven. Bloodraven sent, it would appear, sent the Woods Witch, who became the Ghost of High Heart. The colouring is there, the white skin, the red eyes, all hints of Bloodraven at play. And the Woods Witch was again there at Summerhall. It seems very clear that Bloodraven also was very keen on ensuring that the prince that was promised maintained the right, as he would see it, genetic mix. And that, it seems, is much more likely if it goes down through the line that he was wanting, and he could bring the throne onto that line by getting rid of Egg. It was going to head there at some point anyway, but Egg was on the throne. So if he wanted to get rid of him, if he wanted to ensure that the line of people that he wanted were there, who have incidentally at least 50% Blackwood blood, as well as their Targaryen blood and heritage, I should say, then that is very much the way that he might have gone about doing it. So yeah, I think he's the third suspect. I will get my Poirot moustaches out and I will have a little look at it at some point after season 8, and I'll decide who I think out of those 3 did do it. Mazza Monty, thank you so much, £5. What's your best guess as to the identity of the woman who prays for a son to avenge her in Bran's weirwood dream? I feel it's important. That's a very good question. I've not looked at this for a long time. I think this one I'm going to throw to the chat, because I'm sure there'll be somebody in the chat who's got a really good question, really good answer to this. On these Q&As, when I say anyone ask me anything, there's almost always one question that I have a mind blank on. I did have an answer to this one when I last looked at it, and I honestly can't remember what I thought. So apologies for that. I will answer this in my next live stream. I'll go back and try and think about my answer to that, and I will either at the beginning or end of my next live stream, I will give you my own answer to that one, Mazza, if that's okay with you. And then, but guys in the chat, if you want to weigh in on this one, that would be really interesting. Okay, guys, I don't know how you're doing. It's we've been going like an hour and 3/4 now, which is quite a long time for me. I reckon let's do another quarter of an hour or so, something like that. How does that sound? We will. So, if you've got any more big questions, now is probably the time to drop them in the chat. I've got 3 or 4 more questions from my patrons I want to get through as well. Maura Lee asked, in the video you did with Gemma about the long night, this is the one I was referencing earlier about time travel and things like that. Gemma was talking about Bran, and what if Bran was able to go back in time to affect future events, be Bran the Builder, etc. If Bran had that kind of Green Seer power, how would that affect his Green Seer training and relationship with Bloodraven? So this is a matter of what powers he has now and what powers he might have in the future. One of the things that we agreed on in that video was that Bran at the moment does not have the power to do any of those things that we were talking about. He literally in the books, he's just starting out. So whatever happens, he has to get an upgrade in some way. He has to learn new stuff. He has to gain more strength, something along those lines. How will that affect his relationship with Bloodraven? I think Bloodraven at this point is being sucked up so much within the Weirwood network that he's starting to lose his own distinct personality, as it were. And so I don't think this is going to affect his relationship there. I think Bloodraven knows what power Bran has. I think he can sense quite how powerful he is. But he tries to warn him, and this is partly where all the warnings come in, when he sort of says, you know, I've tried going back and changing things, the ink is dry and all the rest of it. He's sort of warning him about the possibilities of the power that he will have. And so I don't think it's going to affect the relationship. I think that Bloodraven is very aware of how powerful Bran is. Mazamonti, just to follow up to your question by the looks of it, saying the Warg King's daughter, maybe. Maybe, perhaps. So this is, for those who don't know the Warg King, then this was, they were called the Warg Kings, and they were, as the name would suggest, skin changers apparently, and they were based off to the west of Winterfell, on the other side of the Wolfswood, at Sea Dragon Point area, I think it was, and they As part of the Starks expansion, the Starks didn't always run and control all of the North. They, over a period of centuries and millennia, they sort of one after another, they subjugated the different petty kings that were there. The Wild Kings were one of these ones that they subjugated. The way that they seemed to do it was to kill the men and then marry the daughters. That seems to be the plan. The Starks in the olden days were quite bloodthirsty. So could that indeed be who, as you were asking, might be praying for vengeance? Yeah, that's entirely possible. I think the same thing happened with the Marsh Kings as well, who were in the Neck. The Cranach men, as we now know them, the Starks did the exact same thing there. Killed the father, married the daughter. So that was what was going on there. So it could be any one of a number. KFA 403 asks a good question. When will we see Howland Reed? I say it's a good question because it's a question about Howland Reed, and I love questions about Howland Reed. Will he meet Jon and tell him of his true parentage? In the show, no. I think we might have a little cameo from Howland Reed, but I think that we're not going to see huge amounts from him. I think that they've given Bran and Sam the job of learning about what happened in the past. Then on the books, though, I think that he definitely will. George R. R. Martin has confirmed we will meet Howland Reed. I was having I can't remember who I was chatting to about this. I think I was live either on, maybe it was this last live stream, and talking about it was with Gemma when we were talking the video I was mentioning earlier that's on her channel when we were talking about House Mormont. Mage Mormont, who is Jeor Mormont's sister and mother of Lyanna Mormont, she doesn't have much of a role in the show, but in the books, she was last seen sent off by Robb Stark to contact Howland Reed. So she's gone off into the next. So it makes perfect sense that she will at some point emerge with Howland Reed and bring him up, and he will be able to say what is going on and explain the backstory and things like that. So we will see Howland Reed, and I think that he will be explaining what's going on, particularly about what Jon's heritage is. LMC asks $10. Thank you very much. Will you be heading to Nashville for Con of Thrones? Yes, I will. I will be there. I hope to meet as many of you as I possibly can. This is something I've been really looking forward to. So Con of Thrones, for those who don't know it, Con of Thrones is, as the name would suggest, a Game of Thrones convention. It's held once a year. It's going to be in Nashville this year in July over a weekend. And the attraction for me, as well as the fact that there'll be some of the actors there, there will be obviously huge amounts of the normal things you would find at a convention, but most of the content creators who I've had the most interaction with while I've been doing this, people like Gemma and Kyle and LML and Aziz, people like that, they're all going to be there. And I am really looking forward to going and meeting all of these people that I've been talking to every day and collaborating with and all the rest of it. That's something I'm really looking forward to. And the other thing I'm really looking forward to is to actually put sort of faces to names that I recognize from the chat and from comments and from my patrons. It will be amazing to meet people. So yes, I'm definitely going to be going to Con of Thrones, and I will set up at least one kind of meet me event where I'll tell people where I am, and it would be great to meet people. And I probably will also do a few panels. I'm going to put in a few suggestions on some panel discussions I want to do as well at some point in the next couple of weeks. So yes, I will be there. Maura Lee says, in the books, we don't know where Uncle Benjen is. We have been told that he is not Cold Hands. Do you think Benjen will make a reappearance in the books? If so, what is his role in the end game? What do you think he's been up to all this time that he's been lost? Yes, so we don't know where Benjen is. He's not Cold Hands. George R. R. Martin seems to have confirmed this. He is still sort of alive. I think that he is going to be sort of like, although they've made Benjen into a sort of a cold hands kind of figure, I think that we'll probably find that he is quite like that. Um, um, if he were human still and unchanged, then he would have returned to the wall by now. So something has happened to him. I think that his role in the end game, I think we will, in the Winds of Winter, we will see more north of the wall than we have done before. George R. R. Martin has promised us this. When we do, I think that we will find him getting in on the action. Bran will come back down south again. I think that he may well actually have the role that we saw in the show, helping Bran head on down south. And when others go north of the wall, as they surely must, to do a little bit of reconnaissance and figure out what's going on, I think he will also help out there. I think it's entirely likely that he's got the same kind of affliction that he has on the show, that he can't return south of the wall, so he's just going to do what he can north of the wall. And he's probably made contact with people like Bloodraven as well. Linda Presuta, I said we'd get to your question at some point. Bran wanted to be a knight. Do you think some of the lessons from those specific events Bloodraven showed Bran were in order for him to see that he'll need to win no matter what it takes, who or what is sacrificed, or even how dishonorable his actions are, more like Knight Bronn in order to defeat the Night King? Yeah, I think not so much. So this is I think this is probably a book question. Correct me, Linda, if I'm wrong. When Bran first sees through the weirwood tree, and he sees this series of images, little vignettes, really. He sees his father cleaning his blades by the weirwood tree. He sees a couple of children who are probably Benjen and Lyanna playing. He sees a woman kissing a tall man, which is probably Old Man kissing Dunk. What else does he see? He sees, I think, somebody carving some arrows from a weirwood tree. He sees somebody being sacrificed as well in what appears to be a long time ago. So the question of whether or not these are in order to show him that he needs to be what did you say, more perhaps more dishonorable, more like Bronn in order to defeat the Night King. I think I would personally see those visions as being more about actually quite reflective of how the weirwood tree works. It doesn't work in a kind of like a linear, let's pick the moment in time you're going to go there. I think that it moves more with kind of ebb and flow and feeling. And so what we actually had there were things that were more emotionally connected to Bran, if that makes sense, rather than him just being shown things by Bloodraven because they're quite useful for his tuition. So I think Bran just went in there and saw stuff that he just sort of like effectively tapped in, and a tree showed him things which worked with who he was and his emotions and his feelings and his thoughts. So he saw his father. That's entirely logical. That's probably the first place he would have gone to, emotionally thinking back to his father. Then he saw Lyanna and Benjen. Obviously, he knew Benjen as well, so that has got a personal connection. We get Old Nan and Sir Dunk. He obviously has a personal connection with Old Nan, who was there by his side all the time, reading him stories. And also, if we're right, then the result of that liaison was probably Hodor, which, or maybe a couple of generations down from that, obviously again has a connection with Bran. I think then the other things are stuff that's on his mind, like sacrifice, that he's seen these things, which when he's sort of gone up into the weirwood tree, he's seen those things. So again, I think it's more emotion and going back through time and things connected with him in some way, rather than Bloodraven trying to teach him a particular lesson. Veronica Dogon, $20. Thank you so much. Do you think people with grayscale inevitably die, or would they live forever as stone men? So grayscale is another thing that I want to do a full study on, and I think that this is another video for post season 8. So don't worry, guys. This is just me flagging up. There is going to be lots more content even the other side of season 8. I've got so many ideas for videos that I just do not know what to do with them all. This is one of the things I never have a problem with is coming up with ideas for videos. So there's lots more in the works, and one of them, looking into grayscale, is definitely something I want to do a lot more. But in terms of answering whether people with grayscale inevitably die or do they live forever as stone men, I think the implication is that they grayscale covers you, and then yes, you become a stone man, because effectively grayscale is all over you and inside you, and you over time start to petrify, so you sort of become a statue, as it were. So it's the sort of the opposite of what Melisandre talks about statues, stone dragons coming to life. This is about live humans turning to stone, and there are hints that grayscale, which of course came from the sort of the Rhoynar and the battles with the Valyrians to start with, that it seems to affect those with Valyrian heritage more quickly and easily. So it is this kind of opposite of dragons turning to flesh. This might be dragons turning, stone dragons turning to flesh. This is live people with dragon blood turning to stone. So it's like a flip of that. Do they die? It's not 100% clear what death means in this precise sense. If it is physically just things turning to stone, then pardon me, yes, they would eventually die, but they die as stone men, so they become less and less of them as time goes by. That's part of the curse, is that stone men aren't just like the Thing in the Fantastic Four, where they're the same person, but they just look all stony. They do petrify, calcify inside as well, and they start losing who they are, like Beric is another example of people losing who they are inside. So it's not death as we know it, but it's a long, slow breaking down of who you are as a human. Linda Prosuta, again, thank you so much. This is you are incredibly generous today. Thank you. That is incredibly lovely of you. Another $50 is astonishing. Saying a mind needs books and Robert's live streams. Well, thank you. I'm really appreciative of that comment. It was one of the things that I wanted to do is setting up this channel, is to approach things in a way that is a more sort of in intelligent, cerebral approach to good TV shows and books and things like that. This is why I get on guests a lot as well. I love doing these things, so it's just me, but I get on guests to provide alternative thoughts as well, because I don't believe I have a monopoly on wisdom on this subject or any subject. I think that other people's opinions can help sharpen my own, and I think quite often, this is why I often throw to the chat as well, there's so many people with so many amazing thoughts there. But thank you. I'm glad if this is helping you think, then that's exactly what I've been trying to do. So it makes me incredibly happy. Thank you. I've got one more question, I think, from my patrons, which is from Jigs M, saying, in Fire and Blood, Rhaenyra's dragon Syrax died when riderless in the fight at the Dragon Pit. Do you think this foreshadows events in Game of Thrones? Only Drogon currently has a rider. and Viserion also dies riderless in the series. What do you think will happen to Rhaegal? So I've covered a lot of this one already, I think, so I will say that I don't think this particularly foreshadows things. Viserion has now got a rider on the show, the Night King. I think Rhaegal will get a rider in Jon, so I think all three dragons will have a rider, certainly on the show. In the books, it might not be that exact same way, but certainly on the show, I think we're going to have three riders for the three dragons. And even though Viserion died before getting a rider, afterwards, she did. Okay, so that is all my questions I've got from my patrons. Guys, this is your last chance to get questions into the chat. I'm going to start winding up now, but I will come back to the chat in just a second to pick up a last couple of questions. But the things I wanted to say in terms of stuff that's coming up on my channel, I am in the middle of what is looking like it's going to be the longest standalone video that I've done, a sort of scripted video, that is. I kind of treat the podcast style ones and live streams as slightly different, but in terms of scripted videos, this is looking like it's going to easily be the longest one I've done, which is my setting out of all the evidence for R plus L equals J. I'm working my way through all of the what I consider to be the arguments for other solutions of who Jon's parents might be, and I'm going through and setting out what I think all of the evidence is in favor of R plus L equals J. That I'm hoping to get it out Monday or Tuesday. I can't promise it because I've still not finished it. It's taking a long time because it is very long, but it's I wanted to flag up that that's the next big thing in my series of stuff going that I've been looking at with Robert's Rebellion and the Tower of Joy. I will come back after that. There are going to be at least 3 more videos in that series. There's going to be one looking at the Tower of Joy itself, what happened there. There's going to be one looking at Aegon or Phaegon, whether he really is who he was, who he claims to be, because that is all about what happened there in that period of time, rather than what's happening now. His claim rests upon whether or not he was rescued before he was killed by the Lannister forces. And then finally, I want to do a video, it might turn into a couple of videos, about Bloodraven's role in all of this and how he manipulated events all the way through the turning at Harrenhal, Robert's Rebellion, and the Tower of Joy, and what he was doing and why. So that's what I'm doing in that series. I just wanted to flag up. The other thing I want to say, as I always say, patrons, I cannot do this without you. Thank you so much. I am always appreciative of all of your support over there. This is why I prioritize questions from my patrons. And I want to just give you a heartfelt thank you. I really appreciate it. If you are at all interested in supporting the channel, or you want to get access to some extra material and things that I do for patrons, some extra benefits like the chance to put questions that I will prioritize for live streams, or I give opportunities at some levels to influence, to vote on what I will be covering in future videos. If you're interested in any of that, then please check out the link down in the description, patreon.com/InDeepGeek. But let's have a last go, a couple more questions, and then we will sign off. Kelso Sunshine saying, hoping to become a patron very soon. Can't wait. Thank you so much. Prince that wasn't promised saying, I'm a patron but never asked anything on Patreon. Well, please do. It's one of the benefits of being a patron, is you get priority for questions. Eric Grabowski, do you think Jon will warg Ghost in the story? Do you think he will be the same? In other words, do you think George R.R. Martin has written something different to what we saw on the show? Yeah, I sort of covered this briefly earlier. I think in the books, when he is killed, we see he calls out Ghost's name. I think that he then wargs into Ghost. I love the idea that we might have a POV chapter for Jon as Ghost. That would be amazing. But yeah, I think that so he's going to, his spirit, soul, whatever we call it, is going to go into Ghost, and then it's going to be called back into his body, probably again by Melisandre. I think that's the way it's going to go. Antique Gamer saying, do you think the weirwood do not measure time when offering green sight to Bran? Yeah, they don't. The way it's described by Bloodraven is that the weirwoods don't experience time in the same way that we do. Therefore, they're not thinking about stuff in that kind of very linear way that we do. So when he gets green sight, it's not them thinking, well, at this moment in time he's going to get green sight. It's just that's a thing that is happening there. So it's a different way of looking at it. It's thinking more about the nutrients in the soil rather than the time passing. Is Felix Lily saying, is Valonqar gender neutral? In that case, she could have meant Rhaegar's Valonqar. What do you think? So a small moment of clarification, I think, on George R. R. Martin and language use. So he is very clear. He said a number of times he is not a philologist. He's not a studier of language. He talks perhaps enviously, perhaps in awe at, say, Tolkien's ability to completely make up new languages for his creations. He said he didn't do that. He, in the world of Ice and Fire, he came up with a few words that sort of sounded sort of right for the different languages, and he came up with a couple of little sort of nuggets of how languages might work, but he hasn't personally, others have now done this, but he hasn't personally created the languages. Now, that means that when we take sort of things that characters say when they're talking about languages, we shouldn't necessarily take them as being a sort of a rule about the entire language. Now, the reason why people say is Valonqar gender neutral is because when we have this idea of the prince that was promised is gender neutral. It could be princess who was promised, and Aemon Targaryen comes up with this understanding that they just got it wrong. It shouldn't have been prince, it should have been princess. That implies that High Valyrian has at least some words that can be gender neutral. The short answer is that we do not know whether the word Valonqar is gender neutral. But the rest of the sentence is, he shall wrap his hands, clearly implies that when it was given as a prophecy, the giver of the prophecy thought that it was supposed to be referring to a man. So that is it's slightly more nuanced than just saying it's a gender neutral language, therefore it could mean a man or a woman. We don't know for sure. It might be a word that could be taken one way or the other, but the person giving the prophecy, Maggie the Frog, clearly thought that it was a man. That doesn't mean that it is necessarily a man, but we just have to treat it with a sort of a grain of salt. Lara Crook saying, hi Robert, thank you for your wonderful content as usual. You're very welcome. Question, what do you think Varys heard in the flames when he was cut? Seems like the subject has come up so many times. I did do a video on this one if you want to check it out when I've got a lot longer thought out ideas on that one. My personal feeling is that we're not supposed to know. It's the short answer, is that we like to have ideas about all of these things, and we like things to tie into the bigger picture. Our minds try and connect dots all over the place, but actually in terms of a backstory, what matters is the effect it had on Varys. And this is very much the way that George R. R. Martin uses magic, prophecy, all the rest of it, is that actually the truth of something matters less than how people respond to it. So the focus of the story for George R. R. Martin is that this made Varys the person that he was, not just physically, but to the kind of person who swore that he would not be defeated by this. And that made him the spider that we know, the person who climbed socially all the way literally from the gutter, bleeding nearly to death, all the way up to sitting in the small council. This created him as a person. What were the words said from the flames? Varys didn't know. He didn't understand them at the time. If we are ever to find out what they are, then the only person who presumably knew what they were was the wizard the sorcerer who did it. Now, obviously, Varys then went off and captured much later. Did he then ask what those words were? Perhaps, but we've not been told. And I think for all of that reasoning, I think it's perhaps not a satisfying answer, but I think it's the answer George R. R. Martin wants us to have, is it does not matter what those words were. And we therefore are not going to be told what those words were. It's just that what matters is the impact on him of what happened. Morally, thank you. Another super chat that's incredibly generous, $25, saying, love the stories on the Well Told Tale. Thank you for raising that. Yes, for those who don't know, I've got a second channel called The Well Told Tale. I think there's a link again down in the description. And this is where I just read audiobooks. I read books that I consider to be the finest science fiction and fantasy stories ever written. We've literally just this week finished The Call of Cthulhu, which is a fantastic book. Lots of links across to Game of Thrones. The language is very evocative of the kinds of things that we see from the Ironborn in A Song of Ice and Fire. But that's a really enjoyable book. And then next week, then we will be doing some Edgar Allan Poe, which I'm also very much looking forward to. So if you're interested in audio narration, audiobooks, then please do go check that out. Thank you very much for raising that, Maura. Okay, let me just do one last question. Let's see what I can try and find. Trying to find another question. Okay, well, maybe I will. I'll just take a couple of quick comments here. Golden Hand Croc and Tacos, loving the name and love your little avatar, by the way. Golden Hands of the Chain of the Hand of the King, the same one that Tyrion killed Shay with. So this is talking again about the Valonqar, and the Chain of the King has got lots of linked hands on it as well. Yep, so that's certainly a prophecy. Jamie also has a gold hand, obviously. I think I'm going to Valorian saying, that's what I've mispronounced that, Verloren saying, do you think the wheel will be broken? I think that this is very much a matter of what you interpret the wheel as being, what you interpret breaking it as being. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but Dany's understanding in the show saying, well, I'm going to break the wheel, is not to change the system of governance. It is simply to put her and the Targaryens back where she thinks that they belong, on the Iron Throne. That I do not think will fundamentally happen. I do not think that Dany will end up ruling the Seven Kingdoms. So her understanding of what breaking the wheel is, I don't think will happen. But I think that a slightly more fundamental changing the way that the continent is governed will happen. I don't think it's going to go to full democracy. That requires ability to read what's on a ballot paper and things like that, and understanding of the issues and a huge amount of things that preparation would need to be done before they go there. And I think that the idea of moving straight to a full democracy is not going to happen. But what they might move is more towards a council-led system that would change the dynamic, so it's not a king ruling the Seven Kingdoms and then lots of other people just trying to get rid of that king. There will still be power games because humans are humans, but I I think the system itself will change. And in that sense, yes, the wheel will be broken. Okay, guys, I will just finish off my water. Perfect timing, and I will say thank you so much. I really enjoyed this this chat. It's as I will try and do these again about once a month at a more sort of Europe-friendly time. But thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for the excellent questions in the chat. Thank you so much for the super chats. That's incredibly generous. Thank you for my patrons. Please do check out the link to Patreon. And guys, I'm going to see you next for a live stream at my normal time on Thursday at 6 p.m. EST. Hope to see you then. Take care, everyone.